The massive observation window aboard the Galactic Alliance flagship Celestial Seeker offered Commander Thex an unobstructed view of Earth, and what he saw defied all logic. His crystalline body structure refracted the light from the nearby sun as he stood motionless, all four of his eyes fixed on the swirling atmosphere below. "Impossible," he whispered, his translator converting the harmonic resonance of his native tongue into standard Alliance speech. "The readings must be incorrect." But Chief Science Officer Vrel's data was never wrong. The holographic display showed weather patterns that would tear most civilized worlds apart, hurricanes spanning continents, temperature swings that could freeze or boil most known species, and tectonic activity that would render any permanent settlement suicidal. "Sir," Vrel's voice chimed through the ship's communication system, "the human representative has arrived for the briefing." Thex turned away from the window, his crystalline form shifting colors from deep blue to a more formal violet. "Send them in." The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Lieutenant Reyna Patel. She stood straight-backed in her pristine Alliance uniform, dark hair pulled back in a regulation knot, brown skin glowing under the ship's ambient lighting. What struck Thex most was her casual comfort in the ship's artificial gravity, which was set to Alliance standard, significantly higher than Earth's. "Commander Thex," she said, offering both the traditional Alliance gesture of respect and a human smile. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." Thex found himself fascinated by her composed demeanor. Here was a being who had evolved on a world his people would consider utterly uninhabitable, yet she carried herself with quiet confidence. "Lieutenant Patel, please explain to me how your species manages to survive on such a world. Our preliminary scans show conditions that should make complex life impossible." Reyna's eyes lit up with amusement. "With all due respect, Commander, what you consider impossible conditions are simply home to us. Those hurricanes you're monitoring. We've learned to predict them, build around them, even harness their energy. The tectonic activity. We've developed architecture that flexes rather than breaks." She approached the observation window, standing beside him to gaze at Earth. "See those green patches? Those are our forests, Commander. They survive everything from freezing winters to scorching summers. Like us, they've adapted." Thex's crystalline structure shifted slightly, expressing his intrigue. "And the predators? Our scans show creatures that would be classified as apex threats on any Alliance world." "Ah, you mean like the great white sharks, tigers, and bears?" Reyna smiled. "We've learned to coexist with them, study them, and yes, sometimes defend against them. But they've helped shape us into who we are." The commander moved closer to the window, his crystalline form now taking on hints of curious green. "Your species applied to join the Alliance's Joint Defense Force. Initially, we worried you might be too fragile for service alongside other species. Now I'm beginning to wonder if perhaps we're the fragile ones." Reyna turned to face him, and for a moment, Thex was struck by the intensity in her dark eyes. "Commander, humanity doesn't just survive our world, we thrive on it. We've turned our challenges into advantages. Where other species see impossible conditions, we see opportunities to adapt and grow stronger." "Fascinating," Thex responded, his tone carrying genuine wonder. "And you believe these adaptations will serve you well in Alliance operations?" "We know they will," Reyna replied confidently. "Think about it, we're used to operating in constantly changing conditions. We can handle extreme temperatures, varying gravity, and unexpected threats. We're not just survivors, Commander. We're problem solvers." As if to emphasize her point, the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated briefly due to a passing spatial anomaly. While his bridge crew stumbled slightly, Reyna remained perfectly steady, having grown up in Earth's variable gravitational fields. "Very well, Lieutenant," Thex decided, his crystalline form settling into a determined blue hue. "I will recommend to the Alliance Council that we fast-track the human integration program. However," he added, all four eyes focusing on her, "I request to personally oversee the training protocols. I believe we have much to learn from each other. Agreed, Commander, Reyna responded, and Thex noticed something in her expression he couldn't quite interpret. Though I should warn you, human training methods might surprise you just as much as our planet has. As they continued discussing the details of the integration program, Thex found himself increasingly intrigued not just by humanity's physical adaptations, but by their mindset. Here was a species that didn't just endure adversity, they embraced it, learned from it, grew stronger because of it. And as he watched Lieutenant Patel confidently outline her plans for joint training exercises, Thex realized that the Alliance was about to undergo changes far more significant than anyone had anticipated. The humans weren't just joining their coalition, they were about to revolutionize it. The Alliance training facility on Nexus Station hummed with activity as Commander Thex observed the first joint exercise through the control room's panoramic viewport. His crystalline form shifted between shades of blue and green, reflecting his mixed feelings of concern and fascination. Below, in the massive environmental chamber, Lieutenant Reyna Patel led a mixed group of human and alien trainees through what she had casually termed a moderate survival scenario. The chamber currently simulated a Class 3 storm system with gravity fluctuations that would have grounded most Alliance vessels. "They're not even wearing environmental suits," muttered Science Officer Vrel, their typically steady voice wavering with disbelief. Indeed, while the non-human trainees wore full protective gear, the humans wore only light tactical uniforms. Reyna moved through the punishing winds with practiced ease, helping a struggling Meridian trainee whose anti-gravity stabilizers had failed. "Lieutenant," Thex called through the comm system, "perhaps we should adjust the parameters." "Respectfully, Commander," Reyna interrupted, her voice clear despite the howling wind, "this is perfect for teaching adaptive techniques. Watch." She gathered the trainees into a circular formation, demonstrating how to use the storm's own momentum to maintain stability. The humans in the group caught on immediately, their bodies swaying in an almost dance-like rhythm with the artificial tempest. "You see," she explained, "on Earth, we learn to work with environmental forces rather than always fighting against them. It saves energy and reduces equipment dependency." Thex watched as gradually, the alien trainees began mimicking the humans' movements. Even the Meridian trainee, whose species typically avoided any gravitational fluctuations, started to find their balance. "Fascinating," Thex murmured. He found himself particularly drawn to Reyna's teaching method, practical, adaptable, and surprisingly elegant. Her movements showed years of experience dealing with Earth's chaotic conditions, yet she made them look almost effortless. The exercise continued for another hour, with the human instructors introducing various survival techniques that seemed counterintuitive to Alliance standard procedures. Instead of relying on technology to overcome environmental challenges, they taught ways to adapt and use the environment itself. Later, during the debriefing session, Thex approached Reyna as she reviewed the training data. "Your methods are unorthodox, Lieutenant," he said, his crystalline form shifting to a curious violet. "But undeniably effective." Reyna looked up from her holographic display, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Sometimes the best solutions aren't about having the most advanced technology, Commander. They're about understanding and adapting to your environment. Like your species adapted to Earth." "Exactly." She stood, and Thex noticed how the station's harsh lighting seemed to soften when it touched her skin. "Would you like to try some of these techniques yourself?" "Off the record, of course." Thex's crystalline structure flickered with surprise. "I am not sure my physiological structure would be compatible with such methods." "There's only one way to find out," she challenged, her dark eyes twinkling with something that might have been mischief. "Unless you're worried about a little weather." For the first time in his long military career, Thex felt something he couldn't quite classify, a mixture of apprehension and excitement that made his crystalline form shimmer with unexpected colors. "Very well, Lieutenant. Show me." The environmental chamber, now empty except for the two of them, hummed to life with a gentler version of the earlier storm. Reyna stood close to Thex, her presence reassuring as she guided him through the basic movements. Feel the rhythm of the wind, she instructed. Don't fight it, move with it, like this. She demonstrated, her body flowing smoothly through the artificial gusts. Thex attempted to mimic her movements, his crystalline form initially rigid and resistant. But as he followed her guidance, he began to understand. His species had evolved in stable, controlled environments, always using technology to maintain that stability. This was something entirely different, an acceptance of chaos as a natural state. Better, Reyna encouraged as his movements became more fluid. You're getting it. As they moved through the wind patterns together, Thex found himself hyper-aware of her proximity, of the grace with which she handled conditions his people considered dangerous. He realized he was seeing humanity, seeing her, in an entirely new light. Lieutenant, he began, then hesitated. Reyna. I believe I owe you an apology. She paused, looking at him curiously. What for? When your species first applied to join the Alliance, I was among those who doubted your readiness. I thought your planet's harsh conditions would make you, primitive, focused only on survival. I was wrong. Reyna's expression softened. We get that a lot, actually. Most species see Earth and think it's just a death world that somehow spawned sentient life. They don't understand that those conditions are exactly what made us who we are. The storm around them began to fade, but neither moved away immediately. Thex's crystalline form had settled into a deep, steady blue with occasional flickers of rose, a combination he'd never manifested before. I look forward to learning more about your species' perspectives, he said finally. I believe the Alliance has much to gain from your experiences. And we have much to learn from you as well, Commander, Reyna replied. Then, with a grin, she added, though maybe we should work on your stormwalking technique first. As they left the chamber together, Thex realized that these training sessions were becoming far more than just military exercises. They were the beginning of a profound change in how their species understood each other, and perhaps, something more personal as well. The emergency alarms on Nexus 9 station blared without warning, their harsh tone cutting through the artificial night cycle. Commander Thex's crystalline form pulsed with urgent red as he materialized in the control center, finding Lieutenant Reyna Patel already at the main console. Report, he demanded, all four eyes focusing on the holographic display showing the station's status. Massive solar storm approaching, Reyna responded, her fingers dancing across the control interface. 3 times larger than anything in Alliance records. Our standard shields won't hold against this one. Around them, alien crew members rushed to their stations, their movements betraying barely controlled panic. Nexus 9, positioned at the edge of a volatile star system, housed over 10,000 beings from across the Alliance. If the shields failed. Evacuation protocols, Thex began, but Reyna cut him off. No time, she said firmly. That storm will fry any ship that tries to leave. We need to weather this here. Her eyes met his, intense and focused. But I have an idea. Thex's form shifted to an attentive blue. Over the past months of working together, he'd learned to trust Reyna's ideas, no matter how unorthodox they seemed at first. The station's shield generators, she continued, pulling up the technical schematics. They're modeled after standard Alliance designs, right? Built to create a constant, uniform barrier. Correct. The most efficient. On Earth, we learned that uniform barriers aren't always the answer. When facing extreme weather, rigid structures fail. We need to make the shields flexible, adaptive, like the magnetic field of our planet. Vrel, who had just arrived at the control center, chimed in with alarm. Impossible. The shield generators aren't designed for variable output. The power fluctuations alone could tear the station apart. Not if we modify the frequency modulators, Reyna argued. We can create a layered defense, like Earth's atmosphere. Each layer deflects and disperses different levels of radiation. Thex studied the calculations she was rapidly entering into the system. The concept violated nearly every principle of Alliance shield design, but the underlying theory was sound. More importantly, they were running out of options. "How long?" he asked. 20 minutes to make the modifications. The storm hits in 25. Thex's form crystallized into decisive violet. "Do it. Vrel, give her whatever assistance she needs. I'll coordinate with the station's sectors to prepare for potential power fluctuations." What followed was organized chaos. Reyna worked with inhuman speed, directing teams to modify shield generators across the station. Her understanding of Earth's natural defensive systems translated into engineering solutions that made the Alliance technicians simultaneously nervous and amazed. Rerouting power through secondary conduits, she called out, her voice steady despite the sweat beading on her forehead. "Commander, I need you to authorize emergency protocols to override the safety limiters." Thex didn't hesitate. His trust in her had grown beyond mere professional respect, though he hadn't quite admitted to himself just how deep that trust went. 5 minutes to impact, Vrel announced, their voice tight with tension. Reyna made a final adjustment, then stepped back from the console. "It's ready." "But Commander." She turned to face Thex, her expression serious. "This is going to get rough. We'll be feeling a lot of this storm." "How rough?" A slight smile crossed her face. "Like a Category 5 hurricane combined with an earthquake. You might want to warn everyone to grab onto something solid." As if to emphasize her point, the station's lights flickered ominously. The outer sensors were already registering the storm's leading edge. Thex broadcast a station-wide announcement, explaining the situation and preparedness measures. As he spoke, he noticed Reyna bracing herself against the main control panel, her posture reminiscent of their training sessions in the environmental chamber. "Storm impact in 30 seconds, Vrel reported. Thex moved closer to Reyna, his crystalline form automatically shifting to match her stance. "Lieutenant." "Reyna," he said quietly. "If this doesn't work." "It'll work," she interrupted, flashing him a confident smile. "Trust me, Commander. This isn't even the worst storm I've weathered." The first wave hit like a physical blow. The station groaned, its structure stressed by forces it was never designed to endure. But Reyna's modified shields held, bending and flexing with the solar onslaught rather than trying to block it completely. Through the viewport, they watched in awe as the shields created visible aurora-like patterns, dispersing and channeling the storm's energy in ways Alliance technology had never attempted before. The station shuddered and swayed, but remained intact. "Remarkable," Vrel whispered, checking the readings. "The shields are actually getting stronger as they adapt to the storm patterns. They're learning." "Just like we did," Reyna said softly, and Thex noticed she was still standing close to him, their shoulders nearly touching. "Sometimes survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being flexible, adaptive." As the crisis gradually passed and the storm began to dissipate, Thex found himself reflecting on how much his perspective had changed since first encountering humans. Their seeming recklessness was actually calculated adaptation, their chaos was a form of harmony he was only beginning to understand. "Your solution," he said to Reyna as the all-clear signals finally sounded, "it should be implemented across all Alliance stations." "Agreed," she replied, then added with a hint of mischief, "though maybe we should work on getting you more comfortable with a little turbulence first." Thex's form flickered with that same rose tint that only seemed to appear around her. "I believe I'm becoming more comfortable with it every day." The Helios defense station shuddered under another barrage from the Ravager fleet. Commander Thex's crystalline form pulsed with tactical readouts as he assessed their increasingly dire situation. The surprise attack had caught the Alliance's strongest fortress at its most vulnerable moment, during a massive solar flare that had reduced their shield capacity to critical levels. "Status report," he commanded, his normally melodic tones sharp with urgency. "Primary shields at 12%, Reyna reported from her station, now serving as his second-in-command. The Ravagers are using the solar activity to mask their energy signatures. Traditional targeting systems are nearly useless in this mess. The enemy had chosen their moment well. The Ravagers, a species that had rejected Alliance membership centuries ago, were known for their ruthless efficiency. They'd launched their attack during Helios's longest day, when the local star's activity was at its peak and standard Alliance protocols were at their least effective. Just like home, Reyna muttered, studying the environmental readings with an intensity that caught Thex's attention. "Lieutenant?" "The conditions," she explained, her dark eyes lighting up with that familiar gleam that usually preceded an unorthodox solution. "They're similar to Earth's monsoon season combined with a magnetic storm. We're trying to fight this like it's a space battle, but we should be treating it like a natural disaster." Thex moved to her console, his form shifting to curious violet. "Explain." "On Earth, we learned to use extreme weather to our advantage. The Ravagers are hiding in the solar storms. Fine. Let's make those storms worse." She pulled up the station's gravitational control systems, technology usually used to maintain stable conditions within the station. "We can use the gravity generators to create artificial pressure systems. Like a controlled hurricane, but on a massive scale." "The power requirements," Vrel began to object from their station. "We can reroute power from the shields," Reyna countered. "They're barely effective anyway. Instead of trying to block everything, we work with the solar activity. Create a controlled chaos that we're prepared for, but they aren't." Thex studied the projections she was generating. The plan was audacious, perhaps even reckless by Alliance standards. But he'd learned to trust both Reyna's instincts and humanity's unique perspective on surviving hostile conditions. "How quickly can you implement these modifications?" 10 minutes for the basic system. Another 10 to fine-tune it." "But Commander." She met his gaze directly. "This is going to get extremely rough. The station will feel like it's in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane. Most species here have never experienced anything like that." Thex's form crystallized into decisive blue. "Then we'll have to trust in the training protocols you've implemented over the past months." His tone softened slightly. "The ones that taught even me to dance with storms." A slight smile crossed Reyna's face at the memory of their private training sessions. "Let's hope everyone paid attention in class." The next 20 minutes were a blur of activity. Reyna coordinated with engineering teams while Thex prepared the station's population for what was to come. Many of the alien residents were skeptical of deliberately making their situation more unstable, but months of working alongside humans had taught them to trust these seemingly crazy strategies. "Ready," Reyna announced finally. "Initiating gravitational storm protocols in 3, 2, 1. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The station's artificial gravity began to fluctuate in controlled patterns, creating massive electromagnetic disturbances that interfaced with the solar storm outside. Through the main viewport, they could see the space around the station transform into a swirling maelstrom of plasma and magnetic energy. Multiple Ravager ships losing formation, Vrel reported, their voice tight but controlled. Their stealth systems are failing under the gravitational stress. Now they know how a shark feels in a hurricane, Reyna muttered, her hands dancing across the controls as she fine-tuned the chaos they'd unleashed. Thex watched in amazement as the Ravager fleet's carefully planned attack dissolved into disarray. Their ships, designed for stealth and precision, found themselves caught in artificial currents they couldn't predict or counter. Several vessels collided, their cloaking systems rendered useless by the electromagnetic turbulence. Alliance reinforcements arriving in Sector 7, an officer called out. They're using the gravitational currents to boost their speed. Indeed, the human captains in the relief fleet had quickly adapted to the chaotic conditions, using the artificial storm patterns to slingshot their ships into attack positions. The Ravagers, faced with an environment they couldn't control and tactics they'd never encountered, began to retreat. As the battle turned in their favor, Thex found himself standing close to Reyna, watching her orchestrate their defensive strategy with the same grace she'd shown in teaching him to weather storms. "You've done it again," he said softly. "Turned what most species would consider a catastrophe into an advantage." "We had a good teacher," she replied, glancing at him. "Earth never gave us any choice but to adapt. To take what looks like certain death and find a way to dance with it instead." The station shuddered again, but this time it was the controlled motion of their own making, not the enemy's weapons. Thex's crystalline form had settled into that unique rose-tinted blue that seemed reserved for moments like this. "When this is over," he began, then hesitated. "Yes, Commander." There was a warmth in her voice that had nothing to do with battle stations or military protocol. "I believe I would like another lesson in how humans dance with chaos." Her smile was brighter than the solar storm raging outside. "I thought you'd never ask." 1 year after the Battle of Helios, the Galactic Alliance's Central Command hub buzzed with unprecedented activity. The massive chamber, designed to accommodate beings from all member species, had been modified with Earth-inspired adaptive environmental systems. Different sectors now flowed seamlessly between varying gravity levels and atmospheric conditions, allowing each species to operate in their optimal environment while still working together. Commander Thex stood at the central platform, his crystalline form glowing with a steady, confident blue as he presented the final results of the Human Integration Initiative to the Alliance Council. "The statistics are irrefutable," he stated, gesturing to the holographic displays surrounding them. "Since implementing human-inspired adaptive protocols across our facilities, we've seen a 300% increase in cross-species collaboration and a 200% improvement in crisis response times." The council chamber's adaptive environment shifted subtly, accommodating the arrival of Lieutenant, now Captain, Reyna Patel. She moved through the varying gravity zones with practiced ease, her formal Alliance uniform modified with elements of Earth's military traditions. "More importantly," she added, joining Thex at the platform, "we've seen a fundamental shift in how the Alliance approaches challenges. Instead of trying to control or eliminate environmental variables, we've learned to adapt to them, use them, even thrive in them." The council members, representing dozens of species from across the galaxy, murmured in agreement. The success of human integration had exceeded even the most optimistic projections. The Ravagers' defeat at Helios was just the beginning, Thex continued, his form briefly flickering with rose tints as Reyna stood beside him. "By applying Earth-based environmental adaptation strategies to our space stations and ships, we've created defensive systems that no enemy can reliably predict or counter." "But the military applications are only part of the story," Reyna interjected. "Our greatest achievement has been the cultural exchange. Alliance species that once required completely isolated environments now work together in adaptive spaces. We're not just surviving together, we're learning from each other, growing stronger through our differences." The holographic displays shifted to show scenes from across Alliance space, a Meridian engineer teaching a human team about crystal-based computing while they all worked in variable gravity, human weather prediction techniques being applied to stabilize a volatile gas giant colony, Alliance ships using Earth-inspired storm riding techniques to navigate previously impassable regions of space. "Humanity's greatest gift to the Alliance," Thex declared, "hasn't been technology or military strength. It's been a new way of thinking. A reminder that adversity doesn't have to be overcome, it can be embraced, adapted to, even turned to advantage." As the council session concluded and the chamber began to clear, Thex and Reyna remained at the platform, looking out over the adaptive environment they'd helped create. "Did you ever imagine this?" Reyna asked softly, gesturing to the harmonious blend of different species working together. "When you first saw Earth and thought it was an uninhabitable death world?" Thex's form shimmered with amusement and something deeper. "I imagined many things, Captain, but none quite like this reality." He turned to face her fully. "Though I must admit, some changes have been more, personally significant than others." Reyna smiled, reaching out to touch his crystalline surface gently. Where once such contact would have been impossible due to their physiological differences, they'd learned to adapt to each other, just as their species had. Speaking of changes, she said, I received new orders this morning. The Alliance is establishing an advanced adaptation training center. They want us to run it together. Thexa's form pulsed with that now familiar rose tint. Us? They seem to think we make a good team. Something about bringing together the best of both worlds, Alliance experience and human adaptability. Her eyes twinkled. Plus, I still need to teach you some advanced storm dancing techniques. I believe I'm becoming quite proficient at dancing with chaos, Thex responded, his tone warm. Thanks to an excellent teacher. Above them, the environmental systems created a subtle aurora effect, reminder of the solar storm that had first brought them together. Throughout the chamber, humans and aliens moved in their own dance of cooperation, each adapting to the other's needs and strengths. You know, Reyna mused, when we first joined the Alliance, everyone thought we were the ones who needed to adapt. Turns out we all had something to learn about adaptation. Indeed, Thex agreed, his form now glowing with a perfect blend of blue and rose. Though perhaps that's the greatest lesson humanity has taught us, that true adaptation isn't about changing who you are, but about finding new ways to be yourself alongside others. As they stood together, planning their next adventure and teaching the galaxy to dance with chaos, the adaptive environment around them shifted into a perfect balance of all conditions. It was neither purely human nor purely alien, but something new, a harmony born from the willing embrace of difference and change. In the end, humanity hadn't just survived in the galaxy, they had helped it evolve, one storm at a time.